When I was 10, I had my first panic attack at school. I didn't know what it was back then. I just remember my chest tightening, my vision going blurry, and a deep, terrifying feeling that something awful was about to happen. The school nurse said I was being dramatic. My parents agreed. "You always were a little over-emotional," my mom said in the car. "Just breathe next time," my dad added, tapping the steering wheel. "You'll be fine." And that was it. No follow-up, no check-in, just silence. For the next 8 years, I got really good at hiding it. The nausea, the shallow breathing, the nights I stayed awake, heart pounding for no reason I could explain. Because every time I hinted at needing help, my mom would say, "We don't air our dirty laundry, especially not to strangers." And my dad, "You think a therapist is gonna solve your problems? Toughen up." So I learned how to cry without making noise, how to smile through dizzy spells, how to nod politely when someone said, "You're so calm and put together." It was easier that way, easier than being called dramatic, or weak, or embarrassing. But then they changed. Not for me, not out of concern, but for likes. It started with a Facebook post. A photo of me at 15, eyes red from crying after a breakdown I'd had in the bathroom during Thanksgiving dinner. They didn't ask before they posted it. They just captioned it. "Our brave girl has been through so much. Anxiety is real. Mental health matters. Please keep her in your prayers." It got over 500 likes in 2 hours. People commented sending love. "So proud of her. She's so strong." And my mom replied to every comment like she was the one who needed comforting. "It's been a long road, but we're doing our best." We, as if she had done anything but silence me. I confronted her that night. I asked her why she shared that without asking. She smiled like it was no big deal. "People care, honey. You should be grateful. This helps other families too. But it's my story, and you should be proud we're telling it." I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because I'd learned screaming didn't work in our house. So I went back to my room and opened a blank document and started writing everything they never let me say. It became a habit. Every time they posted a new photo, me smiling at a birthday party or looking out a window like some inspirational movie character, I wrote. Every time they added another hashtag, healing, mental health awareness, God gives his toughest battles, I wrote more. Because none of that came from them. It came from me. And they were using it like currency. Turning my pain into posts, my silence into their sympathy. They even started a blog. It was called From Tears to Triumph, Our Family's Mental Health Journey. Our family. Funny, because when I asked for therapy at 16, my dad said, "We're not spending money on you to cry in an office. Go talk to your sister." My sister who mocked me every time I got quiet in a crowd, who told me to just chill when I froze during group outings. She once joked if I had anxiety like you, I'd just stay in bed forever. So I stopped talking to her too. By 17, I had my own job, saved up quietly. And one day after school, I walked into the campus counselor's office. "I don't know what's wrong with me," I whispered, "but I don't want to feel like this anymore." She looked at me like I wasn't broken, like maybe I was just tired from carrying something no one ever helped me hold. She set me up with a low-cost therapist, and for the first time, I started to breathe. Not just physically, emotionally. But of course, my parents found out. They didn't find out from me. They found the receipt in my car's glove box. The next morning, my mom held it up like it was evidence in court. "You've been going behind our backs?" "It's therapy," I said. "Not a drug deal. You should have talked to us first." "Why? So you could stop me again?" My dad slammed his coffee mug down. "You're just trying to make us look bad." That sentence stayed with me, because that's what they cared about. Not me, not my healing, just their image. So I left. I packed my things the next week and moved into a friend's spare room. No dramatic speech, no goodbye dinner, just silence. Just like the one they raised me in. And as I settled into my new space, I made a decision. If they wanted to tell my story, so would I. Only mine would be real. Living with Zoe wasn't glamorous. Her apartment was small, the couch was lumpy, and we had to time our showers so we didn't lose hot water. But for the first time in my life, I could breathe. I didn't have to tiptoe. I didn't have to fake smiles for social media posts I didn't approve. I could just be sad or tired or quiet, and no one tried to fix it. No one told me to cheer up. No one rolled their eyes when I asked for space. Zoe wasn't perfect, but she let me exist without judgment. That alone felt revolutionary. Meanwhile, my parents doubled down. The blog got more dramatic. They started recording awareness videos for TikTok, sitting on our front porch, speaking in soft, performative voices. Mental illness affects entire families. Our daughter's journey has been hard on all of us. All of us? I watched in disbelief as they described supporting me through the dark times, as if they hadn't mocked therapy, as if they hadn't told me to toughen up every time I cried. I saw their videos getting thousands of views. Comments pouring in like, "You two are such strong parents. Your daughter is lucky to have you. This is what love looks like." And it made me sick. They were finally getting the validation they always wanted, not from each other, not from me, but from strangers online who didn't know any better. They had built an entire brand off a lie, and they were winning. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. One night I opened my notes app and scrolled through the journal entries I'd written over the years. There were dozens, some written during panic attacks, some after explosive fights, some after being gaslit into thinking I was overreacting. Each entry ended the same way. I don't think anyone would believe me. But now, I didn't need them to believe everything. I just needed to say it. So I started writing an essay. I called it "The Story They Stole." It wasn't flashy. It wasn't angry. It was just the truth. I detailed how I was shamed for asking for help, how therapy was mocked in our house, how the same people who told me I was too emotional now used my pain for attention. And then, I submitted it to a student storytelling competition hosted by a mental health nonprofit. Not for money, not for revenge, for me, to reclaim the words they twisted. 2 weeks later, I got an email. "Congratulations, your piece has been selected for our spring live showcase." I blinked at the screen. Showcase? Live? On a stage? I nearly closed the email out of panic. Me? Public speaking? But something in me whispered, "Tell it, out loud." For once. The event was 2 months away. Zoe helped me rehearse in the mirror. She stood behind me while I paced in the living room. She helped me pick out a blazer that didn't scream business major, but still made me look confident. I edited the essay a dozen times, each time trimming the anger just slightly, sharpening the honesty instead. Because I didn't want to come off bitter. I wanted to come off true. Meanwhile, back home, my mom posted a blog titled "When They Pull Away." A parent's grief. She said I had chosen isolation, that I was rejecting love in favor of rebellion. I wanted to scream. Rebellion? I was finally healing. Finally understanding what love even looked like. And just because it didn't look like them, they painted me as the villain. That night, I almost backed out of the showcase. But then Zoe sat me down and said something that stuck. "You don't owe anyone silence, especially not people who never earned your story in the first place." So I stayed in. And I prepared. The night of the showcase, my heart thudded so hard I thought the microphone might pick it up. The auditorium was dimly lit. Soft blue light over the stage. 50, maybe 60 people in the audience. Some students, some parents, some therapists, some survivors. And then they called my name. "Next, please welcome Lila Thompson, reading The Story They Stole." I stepped onto the stage, one foot in front of the other. I didn't shake. I didn't smile. I just began. They said therapy was for weak people. So I stayed quiet when my lungs closed up in classrooms. I stayed quiet when the world got too loud and too fast. But then they took my quiet and turned it into stories and made themselves the heroes. The silence in the room was loud. I could feel people leaning in. No one blinked. No one interrupted. No one told me I was too sensitive. And I kept going. I told them about the fake blog posts, the unapproved photos, the guilt tripping, the time I begged to see a counselor, and my dad said, "You're not crazy. Stop acting like it." I ended with this: I'm not angry that they didn't understand me. I'm angry that they didn't try. And I'm here now. Not because of them, but in spite of them. The room erupted in applause. Some people stood, and for the first time in my life, I felt heard. When I stepped off stage, a middle-aged woman in the front row came up to me. She had tears in her eyes. "I said the same things to my daughter," she whispered, until she stopped talking to me. "Your story just helped me understand why." And she walked away crying. I stood there, stunned, because I didn't expect my story to heal anyone but me. But maybe truth echoes. That night, I didn't check my parents' blog. I didn't care what they posted, because my story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. And now it was public. 3 days after the showcase, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I was still tired. Emotionally, still letting the night settle inside me like a soft exhale. Still unsure if I wanted the world to know me like that. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello? Hi, is this Lila Thompson?" "Yes? I'm calling from Safe Space Collective. We were at your live reading. Would you be open to sharing your story on our podcast next month?" I froze. A podcast? My voice? Again? There was a time I couldn't even speak at dinner without being corrected. Now people wanted to record me? I swallowed hard, then said, "Yeah, I'd be honored." The episode was called "Whose Story Is It Anyway?" I sat across from the host, a woman named Jen, in a studio that smelled like cinnamon and coffee. We talked for an hour. I told her about my parents' blog, the TikToks, the captions they never asked me to approve, the time they used a photo of me in the ER after a panic attack and called it a family battle, and how I never consented to a single word. Jen listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she looked at me and said, "That was one of the most honest interviews we've ever done." When the episode dropped, it went viral within 48 hours. Not millions of views viral, but quiet viral. The kind that spreads in therapy groups, and Discord chats, and text threads between sisters. My inbox filled with messages like, "I cried listening to this. My parents did the same thing. You put into words what I couldn't say." Some messages came from teens, some from people in their 30s, 40s. One woman said her daughter had stopped speaking to her years ago, and after hearing my story, she finally understood why. I cried reading that one, because I didn't expect healing to be contagious, but apparently, it was. Then, my mom found it. She didn't call, she didn't text. She wrote a new blog post instead, titled, "When They Twist the Truth, A Parent's Response." I knew it was coming. She described me as confused, said I misremembered things, said the showcase was an attack on a loving family. She didn't name me directly, but everyone knew. And in the comment section, people comforted her. "Teenagers are so dramatic. She'll regret turning on you one day. Stay strong, Mama." I closed the tab, not out of defeat, but out of peace, because I didn't owe them a war. I kept telling my story, not for views, not for revenge, but because every time I spoke, another brick fell off the wall that used to keep me small. That fall, I was invited to speak at a college mental health summit in Portland. They offered to fly me out, cover my stay, and give me a 30-minute keynote slot. 30-minute to tell my truth on a stage 3 times bigger than the last one. I said yes, but not without fear, because guess who lived in Portland? My Uncle Greg, my mom's older brother. And rumor had it, he still talked to her weekly. The night before the summit, I got a message. It was from Greg. "Hey kid, saw your name on the flyer. Would love to come hear you speak. Proud of you." I stared at the message for a while, then replied, "You're welcome to come, but I'm telling the whole story, even if it makes people uncomfortable." He responded, "Then I'll be there early." The next day, I stood backstage, microphone clipped to my collar, staring out at a sea of folding chairs. They were still filling in, some students, some therapists, some parents, and one familiar face near the back row, Uncle Greg. He nodded when I caught his eye, and I exhaled. When I began, I didn't use notes. I spoke from the same place I used to write journal entries from, the place deep inside that always felt unseen. I said, "My parents used my pain like a paintbrush, and they painted a version of me that made them look good. They said therapy was for weak people, but what they really meant was therapy made them uncomfortable, because when I started healing, I stopped needing their version of me." I saw a woman in the third row wipe her eyes. I kept going. I told them about the photos, the performative captions, the podcast, the silence in my house growing up, not peaceful, but punishing. And I ended with this: you can't control who tells your story, but you can write your own version. You don't need their permission to speak, you just need your own voice. The applause wasn't thunderous, it was gentle, like the kind of clap you give someone who just pulled a thorn out of their own skin. After the talk, Uncle Greg found me in the hallway. He hugged me tight. "Your mom's gonna spin this hard," he said gently. "I know," he looked at me. "But you didn't lie." I nodded. "Not a word." He squeezed my shoulder. "Then let her spin. You spoke truth." Later that week, my mom messaged me. Just 4 words. "You broke my heart." I stared at the screen for a long time, and finally replied, "You broke mine." I just stopped pretending it was whole. She never replied again. "I don't know if we'll ever talk again." And that used to crush me. But now I understand. Some truths aren't meant to bring people back. They're meant to set you free. By winter, I had stopped checking their blog altogether. I didn't need to. People sent me screenshots now. They DM me new posts with messages like, "Are they talking about you again?" This feels like shade. But I didn't open them, because here's the thing. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. I'd spent my whole life shrinking in corners while my parents controlled the narrative. Now, I was telling my own story, and people were actually listening. That's how the local news found me. Not a big cable outlet, just a small station that covered community events and human interest stories. But the producer, Mallory, messaged me on Instagram and said, "I saw your summit talk. It hit me hard. Would you consider doing a segment about reclaiming your voice?" I hesitated. TV? That was a big step. Bigger than the podcast. Bigger than the stage. This wasn't just my voice. This was my face. But the girl who used to cry into her pillow and whisper, "No one believes me," she wanted this. She deserved it. So I said yes. We filmed the segment in my therapist's office. Neutral walls, soft lighting, my journal resting on the table beside me. Mallory asked thoughtful questions. She didn't pry. She didn't twist my words. She just let me speak. I told her how I started writing, how my parents used my panic attacks for content, how I was told therapy was for the weak, only to watch them cash in on my recovery when it suited them. "So," she asked gently, "why speak up now?" I looked at the camera, and I said, "Because silence didn't protect me, it protected them. And I'm done protecting the people who never protected me." When the segment aired, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't need to. They found it anyway. How do I know? Because my mom called me. Actually called me. Not a passive-aggressive post. Not a cryptic message. A call. I stared at her name on the screen for a long time. Then I answered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was small, cold, wounded. "I'm telling the truth," I said softly. "You're embarrassing us." I stayed quiet. She continued. "People at church have started asking questions. Your aunt saw the news and texted me crying. Is this what you wanted? To make us look like monsters?" "I didn't call you monsters, no, but you made us look like ones." I swallowed, then said, "Mom, if the truth makes you look bad, Maybe it's not me who should feel ashamed. She didn't answer. She just hung up. That night, I wrote something in my journal. I finally spoke loudly enough that they had to stop pretending they couldn't hear me. And for the first time, I didn't cry afterward. A week later, something unexpected happened. A high school teacher, Mrs. Jenkins, reached out to me. She used to teach English at my old school, she said. I saw your interview. I had no idea you were going through all of that. She paused, then added, I remember how quiet you were. I always thought you were just shy. I wish I had asked more. I teared up reading that. Because someone noticed. Even if it came years late, she asked if I'd come speak to her current students during Mental Health Week. I said yes. Walking back into that school was surreal. The same beige lockers, the same water fountain that never worked, the same hallway where I once hyperventilated and hid in the nurse's office while a substitute teacher rolled her eyes. But this time, I walked in with a guest pass and a clip, and when I stood in front of the class, holding my notes, I looked out at all those young faces and said, if no one has told you this before, needing help doesn't make you weak. Asking for support doesn't make you broken. It makes you aware. And awareness is power. Several students nodded slowly. One girl raised her hand. What if your parents are the ones who don't believe you? I paused, then answered honestly, then you find someone who does. A teacher, a friend's parent, a counselor. Because the truth doesn't need their permission, it just needs your voice. After the talk, that same girl slipped me a note before I left. It read, I'm going to talk to our counselor. Thank you for being brave first. I kept that note in my wallet for weeks. Because that's why I kept going. Not for fame, not for revenge, but for every kid who still sat at a dinner table, shrinking under the weight of being too much. Meanwhile, my parents went quiet. No new blog posts. No sad TikToks. No we're doing our best updates. I wondered if they were regrouping, or if maybe, just maybe, they were starting to feel what I'd felt for years. Invisible. One evening, Zoe and I were on the couch watching a documentary when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. If you ever want to talk like a family again, we're here. No apology, no accountability, just a casual invitation back into the house they kicked me out of emotionally years ago. I read it twice, then locked my phone, because the version of me who would have chased them for closure, she doesn't live here anymore. The girl who once begged to be believed, she has a microphone now. I didn't respond to my dad's message, not because I was angry, not because I was trying to be cold, but because I finally understood something. They weren't reaching out to repair. They were reaching out to control the kind of damage that happens when people start believing me. And the more I spoke up, the more cracks formed in their version of the story. It must have scared them, because silence was the one thing they could always count on from me. Until now. A few weeks later, something happened I never saw coming. I got an email from the director of a major youth mental health organization. They were hosting a national summit in D.C., a 2-day event with panels, guest speakers, and a showcase for advocates and they wanted me to speak. Not just on a panel, not just as a guest, but as the closing keynote. I sat there, reading the email over and over, heart racing. It didn't make sense. I wasn't an expert. I didn't have a psychology degree. I wasn't anyone's idea of a leader, but apparently, my voice, my story was enough. I called Zoe right away. Are you sitting down? I asked. Do I need to be? Maybe. I told her everything. She squealed so loudly, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Lila, this is huge. I know, I whispered. I'm terrified. She paused, then said something that stopped me in my tracks. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be honest. That's what got you here. She was right. My power didn't come from perfection. It came from truth. So I packed my bags, and I flew to D.C. The hotel was massive. Lobbies with glass chandeliers, conference halls that could fit hundreds. My name printed on a badge clipped to a lanyard that said speaker in bold letters. I kept touching it, just to make sure it was real, that I was really here, that I wasn't still sitting in my childhood bedroom, trying to be small enough to stay out of the way. The day of my speech, I walked backstage and peeked through the curtain. Hundreds of people, teenagers, parents, therapists, teachers, even journalists in the front row with notepads and cameras. My palms were sweating, but I wasn't shaking. I knew what I had to say. And for once, I wasn't afraid of being too much. When they called my name, I stepped onto the stage like I belonged there. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I did. I stood behind the podium, looked out at the crowd, and began. My parents said therapy was for weak people. But they didn't mind using my trauma for clicks. They didn't mind crafting a version of me that made them look brave. The only thing they minded was when I told the truth. There were murmurs in the crowd, nods, tears. I kept going. They turned my pain into content, but I turned it into purpose. I used to think I needed their permission to speak. Now I know the only permission I needed was my own. Applause, so loud it startled me, but I smiled. Not because I wanted praise, but because I knew someone out there needed to hear it. Maybe someone just like me. After the speech, I met dozens of people in the lobby. One girl hugged me and whispered, "My mom posts about my depression like it's hers. Thank you for making me feel seen." Another handed me a drawing, standing on a stage, a small microphone in hand, and a big heart drawn over my chest. I almost cried, because I never thought I'd be anyone's inspiration. I just wanted to be heard. But the biggest surprise came the next day. I got an email. Subject line: "We saw your speech." It was from a major podcast platform. They wanted to offer me a limited-run storytelling series. They called it Voice Notes, a safe space where I could record, reflect, and share slices of my story with others. I could interview people, write essays, speak freely, and they'd fund the production. Me, the girl who was once told stop being dramatic. Now, they wanted to pay me to speak. I called Zoe again. "Do you think I can really do this?" She laughed. "You already are." Later that night, I sat alone in the hotel room, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far I'd come. I remembered my parents' faces when I tried to ask for therapy, how they mocked the word, how they said I was fine because I was getting straight A, how they made my panic attacks feel like tantrums, my depression like laziness, and how, when they finally saw the damage, they turned it into blog posts and hashtags and staged photos instead of apologies. But now, I had the mic, and I wasn't giving it back. The first episode of Voice Notes dropped exactly 3 months after the DC summit. It was called The First Time I Wasn't Believed. I recorded it in my bedroom with just a mic, a blanket over my desk, and a shaky but steady voice. I talked about the first panic attack in the school hallway, the way my mom said, "Don't exaggerate," how I learned to keep things quiet, not because I wanted to, but because it felt safer than being ridiculed. I thought a few people might listen. That first day, it hit 7. The messages poured in. People said, "I didn't even realize how much I needed to hear this. Your story gave me words for my own." It's terrifying how similar our families are, and some were darker. They told me therapy was for weak people too, then blamed me when I broke down. I sat with those words. Some nights, I cried reading them, because I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was telling ours. Episode after episode, I pulled pieces of myself out of the silence. How I got my first journal, how my mom posted photos of my tear-streaked face on Facebook with Bible verses below. How my dad said, "Don't be selfish. We have other things to deal with." When I asked to see a counselor, I didn't say their names, but the world still saw them. Then something I didn't expect happened. An influencer who follows the podcast, someone with millions of followers, shared my story. She posted a clip with the caption, "This girl's parents used her pain for content. She turned it into power." Listen to Voice Notes Pod. It's raw and necessary. Suddenly, everything exploded. By the next morning, the podcast hit 500,000 plays. Articles were written. Tweets went viral. One quote from the show kept getting reposted. They told me therapy was for weak people, but I never saw them cry once after breaking me. Then, they responded. My parents. They went live on Facebook, sitting side by side on their beige couch, tissue boxes between them, my mom's voice trembling, on cue. We just want people to know we did our best. We were never trying to hurt her, my dad added. We love our daughter. We just didn't know how to help her. And then came the kicker. We feel like she's telling one side of the story. I sat there watching the replay in disbelief, not because they were lying, but because I could see it now, see the performance, the sad sighs, the carefully chosen lighting, the background with the family photo placed just so. I realized they were doing it again, using me to clean up their image. But this time, people didn't believe them. The comments under the video were brutal. You had years to support her. Now you're just upset she's not doing it on your terms. Why are you only crying now that she's being heard? This isn't a response, it's a PR move. For the first time in my life, the public wasn't on their side, and they were panicking. I got a message from my sister next. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She wrote, I didn't realize it was that bad for you. I thought you were just dramatic. I'm sorry. I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Another part wanted to cry. But mostly, I just felt done. So I replied, thanks. I don't need you to fix anything. But I'm glad you see it now. I kept recording the podcast. And the stories got deeper. I interviewed people who had also been used for content. Kids whose eating disorders were turned into YouTube confessionals by their parents. Teens who had their breakups shared online for sympathy clicks. It wasn't just me. It was a pattern, and we were tired of being props in other people's redemption arcs. Then, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside a hardcover book. The title? Faith and Family Through Trials, A Mother's Story of Healing, by Michelle Thompson. My mom. I blinked. Flipped it open. There were chapters, photos, my name, entire sections describing my panic attacks, my night terrors, my therapy sessions, some of which I never told her about. And on the last page, a dedication to my daughter, who taught me what strength really is. I wanted to scream, because how dare she write a book, make money off of my breakdowns without permission, without accuracy, without even the decency to tell me. But this time, I didn't just cry. I called my lawyer. I sat across from my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Asha, who wore confidence like armor. She flipped through the pages of my mom's book slowly, her expression unreadable. When she reached the dedication page, she looked up. She used your real name, detailed your medical history, claimed your words as her own. Did you consent to any of this? I shook my head. Not a single word. She closed the book. Then let's make this simple. We send a cease and desist. We request the publisher pull all unsold copies. And we pursue damages, if you're up for it. I exhaled. A long, slow breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for years. I'm up for it, I said. When the legal notice went out, my mom didn't respond right away, but the internet did. People began finding excerpts from the book and comparing them to clips from my podcast. They lined them up side by side, and what they found was chilling. Verbatim quotes. Same story, same exact trauma timelines. Only hers were dressed in holy metaphors, and polished with phrases like, we never gave up on her. Except they had. Over and over. The irony, they always said therapy was for the weak. But now that they were under legal fire, they suddenly wanted sympathy. Then came the email. From her. Subject line, why are you doing this? As if I hadn't spent the last year explaining exactly that. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Asha. She responded with a short, professional notice. All communication must go through legal counsel. Cold? Yes? Necessary? Absolutely. Because my mom didn't want a conversation. She wanted to manage me. And I was done being manageable. The publisher eventually pulled the book. They issued a quiet public statement. Due to unresolved concerns regarding consent and accuracy, we are withdrawing this title. It never made the news. But the people who needed to see it, they did. And that was enough. That night, I recorded a special podcast episode. Not angry, not vengeful, just tired. But honest. I titled it, What They Don't Own. I said, your story isn't theirs just because they were there. Being your parent doesn't give them the right to narrate your pain like a character arc. I'm not mad that they didn't understand me. I'm mad they refused to try until there was an audience. The episode was quiet. No music, no editing. Just me. Just truth. And it hit harder than any of the others. It passed 1 million plays in 2 weeks. And with it came a new kind of message. From people in publishing, producers, agents. They weren't asking me to be someone else's story. They were asking if I wanted to write my own. Asha helped me navigate it carefully. I chose a small but powerful publisher with a reputation for protecting marginalized voices. And I wrote, not for vengeance, but for peace. The book was called The Quiet Ones Weren't Sleeping. And on the dedication page, I wrote, to the girl who was told to be quiet, you were never too much. They were just too afraid to listen. Months passed. I never heard from my dad again. He stayed in the background just like he always did when my mom was taking the spotlight. But one day, I saw his name pop up in the comment section of a video someone posted of me speaking. He wrote, you don't know the whole story. And someone replied underneath, we didn't need the whole story to see that you weren't the one hurting. I didn't reply, not to him. Not to anyone else trying to drag me back into that house with guilt and gaslighting. Because here's what I learned. You don't owe people your silence just because they gave you a roof. Especially when that roof only existed to keep you under control. Now, when I speak, I say this. Survivors aren't loud because they want revenge. We're loud because no one believed us when we were quiet. The book hit bestseller lists within 3 weeks. I donated part of the earnings to youth therapy programs in underfunded schools, because no kid should ever have to fight for the right to get help, and definitely not while their parents are profiting off their breakdowns. The first time I walked into a bookstore and saw my book on the shelf, I stood there frozen for almost 5 minutes. The cover wasn't flashy, no dramatic colors, just my name and the title. The Quiet Ones Weren't Sleeping. The cashier didn't know who I was. Neither did the woman flipping through a romance novel 2 aisles over, but I knew. I had gone from being the girl hiding in the nurse's office with shaking hands, to the one people now quoted at school assemblies and therapy conferences. It still didn't feel real, but it was. I got invited to speak at a university on a panel about internet privacy, mental health, and growing up under surveillance. The moderator introduced me as an author, advocate, and survivor of parental exploitation. I almost laughed, because that version of me, it didn't exist 2 years ago. Back then, I was overly emotional, too sensitive, ungrateful. Now, I was resilient, grounded, and apparently brave. It's funny how language shifts when you're no longer trying to make people comfortable with your pain. After the panel, a girl about 17 came up to me. She had tears in her eyes and said, my mom live streams our fights. When I ask her to stop, she says, you're just embarrassed because you're wrong. Is it bad that I want to leave home the minute I turn? I looked her right in the eye. It's not bad, it's brave. And if you leave, you're not running away. You're choosing peace. She hugged me. That hug? It stayed with me for days, because she reminded me of me. Only now, I was the one offering the safety I once prayed someone would give me. Eventually, my podcast wrapped up after 20 episodes. I knew I could have kept going, but I didn't want my identity to be only about pain. I'd spoken, I'd been heard, I'd been believed, and now it was time to live. I moved into a small apartment near the river. No one else's name on the lease. No curated aesthetics for content, just mismatched mugs, secondhand furniture, and total freedom. Zoe helped me paint the walls one Saturday. We got more paint on our jeans than on the trim. She stepped back, hands on hips, and said, I like this version of you. I smiled. Me too. Then one afternoon I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten envelope. No return address. Inside a single page. We didn't understand back then. We're sorry. We won't bother you again. Mom. No apology for the book. No admission of using my trauma. Just 7 sentences. And a final period. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I didn't even feel tempted to respond, because closure didn't come in the form of an apology. It came when I stopped needing one to feel whole. The last event I spoke at was for a nonprofit that funded scholarships for teens pursuing therapy, social work, or advocacy. They asked me to give a closing speech. The room was filled with high school seniors. Some looked scared. Some looked defiant. All of them looked like they needed someone to believe in them, so I told them the truth. If they call you weak for asking for help, they're more afraid of healing than you are of pain. Don't let people who fear their own reflection tell you that your mirror is broken. Speak, cry, write, get help, heal publicly, if you want to, quietly, if you need to. But heal. And know this: your story doesn't have to be perfect to deserve a microphone. When I finished, the applause felt like thunder. But it wasn't about me. It was about us, all the kids who were told to sit down, be quiet, get over it. All of us who turned our silence into something loud. As I walked off the stage, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one crying behind closed doors, the one who wanted someone to believe her, the one who thought her voice only had value if someone else said it did. She didn't disappear. She just grew up and turned the mic on.